Hi, Contract MVPs. It's Foster Sayers, General Counsel and Chief Evangelist for Pramada and Contract MVP. And my tip today is to share my best practices on software license term. In part one, I'm going to focus on the licensor's point of view. So these tips are for when you are licensing software to an end user, to a customer, okay? Now, the first set of tips I expect are a bit obvious, but I always like to be comprehensive, so let's cover them off. When you license software, you want the term to be long. It's better than having a short term. So month to month, no good. 12 months, not great. 36 months, okay. 60, now you're talking. Automatic renewals. So California has a specific automatic renewal law. Maybe I'll dissect that on another tip and how you conform with that, but make sure that you conform to the requirements of your jurisdiction. But in any case, it is a best practice to automatically renew your software license terms. And finally, it's a best practice to include the rights to sunset your software or end of life your software. And this is essentially termination for convenience. However, you do want to state it in the context of a sunset right. That's the best practice. Why? Why isn't it better to say you can just terminate for convenience? Because then that invites your customer to say, okay, cool, make it mutual. And that's not what we're trying to do. And so you want to distinguish that, hey, this is so that, years and years from now, when, this type of technology stack is a security vulnerability and it's just not compatible with the latest and greatest technology world we live in, we need to be able to end of life that. Now, a little bit more sophisticated best practices when you're licensing software, and those relate to term trigger. So what I want to remind everyone is that you can have a term that's different for your master agreement and your software license term. Don't have to be the same. So noting that, I want to make sure everyone knows, do not use start date or go live as the trigger for when the license term commences. Can you? Yes. Do people? Constantly, all the time. And then what happens? Well, they struggle. And they struggle to manage it. Why? Because they have a contract, and the contract states there's a license term, and it states that license term begins on a start date or a go live date that is not captured in the agreement. That data, that key term, lives outside the contract. And that is why this paradigm is not a best practice. So you can't know when this agreement renews, expires, or how you not renew it if you don't first get to that date wherever that lives. And if you can't find it, well, then you have a dispute. Customer's like, I wasn't live on that date, or I was live way before that, right? Even if you're really rock solid on these things, and you better be if you're supporting that paradigm, you can still set yourself up for a dispute. And ultimately, if that start date or go live is, a value that lives in some separate system, then it can be hard, right, to demonstrate unambiguously this is your start date or this was your go live date. And that can lead to controversies that would have been avoidable had you specified the specific date that the license term began on. Well, how do you do that in software? Well, you do use an effective date or an order effective date as the trigger for when the license term commences, right? And so if you define effective date as the date both parties sign the document, same with order effective date, or you define it as it is October 31st, 2022, whatever the case may be, you want it to be unambiguous. So that defined term, relates to a very specific date, and that date is in the contract, right? It's either the date that is attached to this, the counter signature, or it's the date that is, stated as the beginning date for the license term that is, concurrent with its execution, right? So you do not have your effective date or your order date as the trigger, then you want to rethink that. And when you rethink that, make sure that it is a very ascertainable date that will live within the executed contract. If you don't, you're going to set yourself up for disputes, confusion, and a tremendous difficulty in managing your commercial commitments and tracking them as it pertains to your software license terms. So some of you may be thinking, okay, using the effective date or order effective date, that results in their software license terms starting before they actually are live, have access to the system. Now, what do we do about that? Well, we're going to come back for part 2. I'm going to talk about how we address those concerns, and I'm going to get into what you want to do when you're the one that is the licensee in licensing software. So hope you enjoyed the tip and hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye for now.